all wars are bloody.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover.
Some wars are bureaucratic.
It's one small step. Hippity-hoppity.
They sent a dog into space.
Two superpowers, two ideologies, duking it out on the world stage.
If you want to understand the Cold War, you must look to the hamburger. I mean, it's literally a bay filled with pigs.
Nuclear near misses, proxy wars, and espionage. This is the story of the Cold War.
I'm sorry. And that's when I got the diagnosis. I was a communist.
It all started here, Russia, 1917, where one Vladimir Lenin is leading the October Revolution, which starts in November. Truly revolutionary. Lenin and his Bolsheviks are violently overthrowing the Russian government and in its place establishing a new political regime focused on a few essential things: peace, bread, and the downfall of the greedy capitalists. What could go wrong?
Who wants lettuce again?
Everything could go wrong, because under Lenin's rule, many atrocities would be committed. Murder, theft, worse. This system was called communism, and it would come to define the 20th century, as Lenin would quickly establish the ideal version of a communist society, meaning no food, no political enemies, and all the power. Lenin's Red Terror spread far and wide, and all were affected. Tsarists, clergies, but most of all, the farmers.
What are you in for? Growing food. Stay the f*** away from me.
But one day, Lenin's scalp got cold, and he died. Phew, that guy was the worst. He imprisoned everyone, he stole from everyone, and he was just a massive dick. Like, literally, he looks like a dick, and anyone would be better. Well, almost anyone. Meet Joseph Stalin, the new leader of the United Soviet Socialist Republics, and the only man worse than Lenin. Stalin would use his charisma stats and handsome mustache to consolidate power within the Soviet Union. Political enemies became political ghosts, naysayers became Siberian stayers, which allowed Stalin to consolidate all the power into his iron mustache, putting all his friends in powerful places and all his enemies in cold places. Well, almost all his enemies.
I am God! Sir? Sir? Adolf Hitler has invaded Poland. Aww, I wanted Poland.
A man with a silly mustache wants to take over the world. He invades Poland, he invades France, he even invades Africa. And now Stalin didn't mind any of this. Actually, he quite liked it, as it allowed him to do a little invading. But that all changed when Adolf Hitler slapped Stalin in the face with a surprise invasion. But lucky for Stalin, his iron mustache reflected the blow. A long story short, Hitler gets cold, and the Red Army pushes all the way to Berlin, occupying all this land in the process. Germany surrenders, and Berlin is now Stalin's, meaning finally he could rest.
Stalin! Hey, Stalin! Are you using this Reichstag thing? God damn it.
Apparently, America and Britain had also pushed through to Berlin. Boom bang, the enemy was defeated, but not all was well. For without the glue of Hitler's mustache, the cracks in the tenuous relationship began to show. President Truman and Winston Churchill viewed Stalin as an authoritarian brute, while Stalin viewed the West as corrupt capitalists, meaning trust was low and suspicion high. So it's no surprise that when the three parties met to divide up Europe, things went less than ideal.
Stalin, Churchill, Hitler. Do you know what this is? A giant penis? Don't be a buffoon, Winston. It's a nuclear bomb. Everybody knows that. Even dead Hitler. Wait. Stalin. How did you know about the bomb? My mustache told me.
President Truman tried to intimidate Stalin by revealing the nuclear bomb, but this only triggered Stalin's trap card, espionage, as Stalin already knew about the bomb from spies within the American government.
Yeah, they've got these two huge bombs that could destroy an entire city.
And from here, negotiations continued to crumble. Organizations like NATO, the World Bank, and the Council of Nicaea formed to prevent future war, but Stalin resisted all attempts at cooperation, viewing them as capitalist tricks, and instead created his own NATO, but instead of getting invited, you simply can't refuse.
Where do I sign? Right here.
Stalin would establish a wall of satellite states called the Eastern Bloc, and just like that, an Iron Curtain tore Europe asunder, and the Cold War had officially begun.
Oh, I'm stuck.
It's the late 1940s. Europe is in ruin, the East is on fire, and America is absolutely unscathed. Yet despite nobody wanting World War III, tensions quickly arise across the globe between the Soviets and the West. In Greece, the British helped stymie a communist takeover. In Turkey, American warships flexed in front of the Soviets. And in Iran, Stalin refused to leave despite Pinky promising to evacuate after World War II. But luckily, America was there to save the day.
And where do you think you're going, pretty lady? Let her go, Stalin, you communist scum. Oh, spare me the white knight routine, America. You're just after her giant jugs of oil. That's a low blow, Stalin, even for you. Now get lost before I kick your ass. You and what army? This army. Man, I gotta stop saying that.
Turkey, Greece, and then Iran. 3 attempts at communist expansion met by 3 capitalist walls. The plan of the West became clear: prevent communist expansion at all costs. But if there was any doubt, President Truman would just come out and say it.
Stalin is a doo-doo head.
It's called the Truman Doctrine, and it took tensions from here to here. And on April 3rd, 1948, America launched a full-scale invasion of Europe. Think Normandy, but with less tanks and more cash. It's called the Marshall Plan, a huge economic aid program where the United States gave $13 billion to help rebuild Europe. That's one whole F-35 Stryker. But why? Why spend all this cash on French scum? Kindness? No. Generosity? Stop. Croissants? Maybe.
I should invade France.
The main goal was to make communist nations super duper jelly of all that capitalist prosperity, and this would tempt the red nations to become green nations. That way, not only do you contain communism, but you actually eradicate it, while also expanding your economic spheres of influence, and making Stalin look like a total dick. And it worked. Soviet states like Czechoslovakia looked over the border at their friends partying and said,
Man, Stalin's party sucks. There's literally no food. Yeah, but look at all this vodka. True, but let's sneak over there. I saw Stalin go to sleep. And where, perchance, are you going? To the gulag.
But the good caused by the Marshall Plan caused a severe allergic reaction in Stalin. So to balance things out, he decided to do a little evil. So he pulled out his map, surveyed the landscape, and located his next conquest. This, a blemish right in the heart of the Soviet Union. A middle finger directed straight at Stalin's mustache. Berlin. Now, despite being behind Soviet lines, Berlin remains split into 4 sectors. An American, a French, a British, and a Soviet. So unfair. Berlin was Stalin's birthright. The Red Army conquered it, not America. And so Stalin did the most communist thing possible. He starved the people, blocking all supply routes into Berlin and encircling the innocent, just to say to America,
If you want them, Truman, come and claim them.
to which America replied,
Hey, Stalin. Yeah? Look up. You son of a bitch.
Instead of breaking the Soviet siege, the Western powers just airdropped in supplies. Food, toiletries, candy, you name it, they drop it.
Aw, it's broken.
The Berlin airlift was a major success, forcing Stalin to lift the siege. Woo-hoo. West is the best, and Stalin is smelly. This whole Cold War thing is gonna be over before...
What was that?
The Soviets have successfully tested a nuclear bomb, Mr. President.
But how?
I believe we have a leak, sir.
Clearly, but how did the Soviets learn about the nukes?
The Soviets now had the bomb, and clearly America had a rat problem. So President Truman called in an exterminator, one Joseph McCarthy. Senator, Marine, paranoid. McCarthy looked from sea to shining sea, and all he saw were communists. Him, her, them. McCarthy stoked the flames of paranoia and led witch hunts across America. If you don't like someone, just call them a communist. Oh, your boss is mean? Communist. Husband late from work? Communist. Child going vegan? Communist. Lives were ruined and families torn apart. But this fear of communism wasn't completely unfounded. Other nations seemed to be turning red overnight. In China, Mao Zedong established a communist utopia. They shared their food, they shared their wealth, but most of all, they shared their famine.
This doesn't count. I'm having this as a yummy snack.
And this freaked out America and England, who granted their eastern colonies independence out of fear of revolution. Meanwhile, France just said,
Croissant.
as they refused to give up Vietnam. But none of these nations would be the inciting incident. No, it would be right here, along the 38th parallel, that things would go from warm to blazing. Korea.
But deliver us.
June 25th, 1950, the Soviet-backed North Koreans invaded the South. Bam! In the blink of an eye, Korea was almost completely red. But NATO was ready, and armies from around the globe united to stop this invasion. America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Antarctica, Ethiopia, and more all came together with one purpose in mind: stop the communists. Appeasement didn't work before, and it wouldn't work now. Boom! The NATO forces pushed the North Koreans back and back. Further, even further. Perfect. All the way to the Chinese border, to which the NATO forces said,
Gentlemen, I'd like you to give yourself a round of applause because we just conquered Korea. You see that? That's the Chinese border. And you see those tanks? Those are Chinese tanks. Wait, Chinese.
Everybody panic. 300,000 Chinese troops screamed into Korea. The NATO forces screamed as they fled.
Oh, fuck!
And fled. And in his desperation, General MacArthur pulled out the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb. But just as he went to press the button, his hand was stayed, for it was President Truman denying his request. Remember, Russia now also had the bomb. Retaliation was possible, meaning American lives are now at stake, to which MacArthur said,
Oh, come on. Just let me use one. The small one. For the 13th time, Douglas. No. Actually, you're fired. Get out of my sight. Aw. Alright, well, I guess I'll just leave now forever. See ya. Douglas. Yeah? Take the nuke out of your shirt, please. Damn it.
Korea was back in a stalemate, right along the 38th parallel. All that bloodshed, all that horror, all that script writing, for nothing. So to make up for time, let's fast forward a bit. It's 1957 and a few things have happened. A controversy at the Suez Canal, Hungary had a revolution, but most notably, Stalin is now dead, meaning the Soviet Union needs a new leader. And there's two options, this guy and that guy. But oddly enough, this guy miraculously disappears, leaving one Nikita Khrushchev to take control. And oh boy, would he take control. Because with his first order of business, Khrushchev said what no man dared to say.
Stalin was bad. That guy's not gonna last a week.
Khrushchev began a campaign of de-Stalinization, essentially removing Stalin from Soviet life, taking down statues, erasing his name, and placing his corpse where it belongs, the trash, where another object caught Khrushchev's eye.
How did I get in England?
An American U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union, and the pilot was captured and put on trial. Yet America denied any involvement in the incident.
Please, Mr. President, save me. New phone, who dis?
The Soviets were furious. Stopping the spread of communism was one thing, but deliberately spying on the Soviet Union was a whole nother level of aggression. So President Dwight Eisenhower took that steaming hot potato of tension between the Soviets and America and just tossed it to his successor, John F. Kennedy. That smile could reflect a bullet. Kennedy inherited a very complex situation. Both Soviet and American missile arsenals had expanded, a literal dick-measuring contest, which culminated in the invention of the hydrogen bomb. 1,000 times stronger than Fat Man and Little Boy.
Impressive.
This new technology represented a new beginning. The beginning of the end.
I have cancer now.
But perhaps even scarier, the method for deploying these bombs expanded as well. Meet the ICBM. Now don't let that cute pic fool you. This bad boy was a bad boy. It could target anyone from anywhere. Oh, you wanna bomb Georgia from Georgia? Easy. No longer were you limited by distance, meaning things were seriously getting mad, and this led to the term MAD, mutually assured destruction, and it went a little something like this.
Dude, why do you have all those bombs? Because you have those bombs. Well, I need these bombs because you have those bombs. Exactly. And I need these in case you use those. Hey! Hey! It's 3 a.m. and some of us have to work tomorrow.
And now it's 1961 and a literal wall has been erected in Berlin by the Soviets. It had barbed wire, It had landmines, and it had annoying border guards who continually obstructed movement across Berlin lines.
Sir, I'm gonna need you to bend over.
This haranguing by Soviet guards took tensions from a 5 to a 10, as American diplomats struggled to cross freely between East and West Berlin. As a result, American tanks rolled up to the border known as Checkpoint Charlie to send a message to the Soviets. The message was received, so the Soviets brought out their own tanks with their own message.
Oi! Toyamatsabaka!
The two sides sat at the border between East and West Berlin, tanks at the ready, and it appeared as if World War III was on the horizon. But fortunately, the President Kennedy found Nikita Khrushchev's phone number, and they settled the blow up before it turned into a blowout. Kennedy sat there, sweat dripping from his handsome brow, as he let out a deep, exhausted sigh. Phew. A bullet narrowly avoided, and hopefully, the last crisis bullet of his presidency. Wait a minute!
Yes?
Sir, it's the Pentagon.
Put him through. Mr. President, we've got a pig problem.
A big problem?
No, a pig problem.
A pig problem?
Sir, it's the Bay of Pigs. That is a big problem.
April 17th, 1961, President John F. Kennedy is informed by the CIA of a secret mission to overthrow communist dictator Fidel Castro from Cuba. The plan? Fund, equip, and train local Cubans to lead an uprising. That way, America's hands stay clean while the world gets dirty. It's called a proxy war, and it would be utilized throughout the 20th century.
If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble.
And back in Cuba, the CIA began training the revolutionaries for the beach invasion. It worked at Normandy, should work here. Just do a few jumping jacks, climb this wall, and take this gun, because now you're ready.
Mr. President,
Yes?
this is Alejandro from the Cuban task force. We landed at the Bay of Pigs like 2 days ago, and there's literally no sign of the American military anywhere. You guys coming? Oh, you meant that Bay of Pigs? Get out of there right now.
Cuba is a disaster. Crucial American forces were diverted away from the invasion, which led to the capture of the Cuban revolutionaries. It's called the Bay of Pigs, and it's America's greatest embarrassment since the invention of white bread.
I have diabetes now.
Castro was livid, so to get back at the United States, he accepted aid from the Soviet Union. Not that kind of aid. Closer. Closer. There you go. Weapons. Nuclear weapons. Kennedy shivered, and America held its breath, for the Cuban Missile Crisis had come.
Of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
This is a special report.
As a Cuban Missile Crisis.
At its beginning, this day looked as though it might be one of armed conflict.
I have directed the armed forces to prepare.
The Soviet missiles just sat on Cuba, mocking America. So close, yet so far. They could essentially hit anywhere in the United States. And so America promptly established a blockade around Cuba, readied an invasion force, and aimed their missiles right at the Soviets. But this only triggered their trap card as the Soviets aimed their missiles at America. It's a Mexican standoff, but instead of 2 casualties, you got 2 billion. So we've got 2 superpowers with 20,000 missiles ready to start Armageddon. Pretty bad. But somehow, things were about to get a whole lot worse.
What the fuck? Kraken!
A Russian submarine and an American warship have a close encounter. The warship signals for the sub to surface, but the sub misunderstands the message and almost uses a nuke out of fear of war. Yikes. Things have gotten way out of control. So President Kennedy called Nikita Khrushchev on their private line and simply made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Just put away the missiles, and I'll give you the secret white bread recipe.
It's a no. So Kennedy tried again.
How about a picture of Marilyn Monroe naked?
Still no good. So in his desperation, Kennedy tried one last thing.
Okay, how about this? We promise to never, ever invade Cuba, and as a bonus, we'll remove our missiles from Turkey. Throw in the pic of Monroe, and you got a deal.
Disaster was averted, and once again the globe breathed a sigh of relief. But these constant near blow-ups were exhausting, and so to avoid future conflicts, these leaders decided to finally make some changes. It's 1964, and things have changed. Kennedy's smile proved to be less bulletproof than I thought, and Nikita Khrushchev was replaced by one Leonid Brezhnev, a passionate, unpredictable man known for ruthlessly putting down revolutions and loving Stalin.
Please, Lord, help me be more like Stalin.
And with Kennedy missing a head, one Lyndon B. Johnson would take office and immediately be met with a crisis, for a small Asian country had big ambitions. Communist ambitions. This country, Vietnam, who like Korea was split into a northern communist regime and a southern anti-communist regime. Vietnam had been ravaged by war, first the Japanese, then the French, and now themselves, as the Soviet-funded Viet Cong used guerrilla warfare to disrupt anti-communist control of the South. But the tides of war would change with a single incident on the tides. Allegedly, an American warship was attacked by the North Vietnamese off the Gulf of Tonkin. This would prompt Congress to elevate the United States' involvement in Vietnam, which means it's time for invasion time.
Woo! This is gonna be just like Normandy.
It's nothing like Normandy. Actually, it's unlike any war America has fought before. In the past, we could just say, there's the redcoats, let's kill them. But in Vietnam, America faced a new enemy with special powers, an invisible enemy. The Viet Cong, who utilized their rich knowledge of the landscape and home field advantage to confuse, trick, and mercilessly pick apart the American forces who were ill-suited to the difficult terrain and less than comfortable climate.
Oh, God, I hate this jungle. It's hot and there's bugs everywhere, and I'm all out of heroin. I could just shoot an innocent person right now. Calm down, Carl. Here, chew this leaf to calm your nerves.
America was in a foreign land fighting an unfamiliar foe, who, like the Americans of old, used guerrilla warfare to slowly drain their enemy's vast resources. Long story short, the Vietnam War failed. But unlike older wars, this war was broadcast for everyone to see.
Dad, are we the bad guys? Yep.
The senseless nature of the violence quickly eroded American support for the campaign. Protests happened, hippies accumulated, and the very fabric of American society was torn asunder.
Ban white bread.
America pulls out of Vietnam, and just like that, it's now red. But while Vietnam sunk American support, the space race propelled American imaginations, as on July 20th, 1969, America landed on the moon, planting a literal and figurative middle finger right to the Soviets' face. Finally, some good news. And speaking of news, we've got a new president. Enter Richard Nixon, who ushered in the era known as détente, a period marked by diplomatic successes between the Soviets and Americans. Soviets. Nixon and Brezhnev actually became quite friendly. Nixon went to Moscow while Brezhnev came to America. He visited Hollywood. He saw the White House, but he didn't get to go to Disneyland, which saddened him greatly. And for once, I'm not making this up.
Sir, are you sure about this?
Just do it.
The two sides would sign the first SALT Treaty. Not that kind, this kind. A strategic arms limitation treaty, forcing both sides to dismantle some of their nuclear arsenal while also allowing the other to check for complete cooperation.
What is that? Aliens?
Wow, this Nixon guy is fantastic. He pulled us out of Vietnam, he is practicing diplomacy, and he is just so handsome.
Truly the perfect president, is what I have to say, because Nixon is eavesdropping on me.
And that's not the first time, as the now infamous Watergate scandal revealed Nixon's involvement in a variety of naughty illegal activities. This led to Nixon's resignation in 1974, leading to the eventual election of Jimmy Carter. Now, don't let his face fool you. Carter was, well, adequate. He continued to foster relations with Moscow and signed yet another treaty, but perhaps most impressively, by utilizing the power of his mesmerizing smile, Carter managed to convince the Soviets to dismantle all their nukes, throw away all their weapons, so that the world could finally live happily ever after.
Sir.
What?
The Russians are invading Afghanistan. What's in Afghanistan?
It's 1979, and the Soviets have invaded Afghanistan. And it goes about as poorly as Vietnam. America supported the Afghani Mujahideen against the Soviets, meaning the détente. The peace was about to break, because we've got another president, Ronald Reagan. Tough, stern, and wrinkly, Reagan sought to break the stalemate with the Soviets. First order of business? Slander.
I'd like to make a very bold statement. Stalin was bad.
Reagan began questioning the Soviet status as a superpower, calling them weak, insignificant, and the bad guys, which is usually what the bad guys say. Reagan created a policy of peace through strength, drastically increasing America's military might, but most notably pursuing a new defense matrix codenamed Star Wars. Using lasers, force fields, and computer technology, Reagan hoped to protect the American people from disaster. It wasn't possible, but many believe it was just a bluff, and it worked. The Soviets began pouring resources into their own impossible force field, wasting resources they could ill afford to waste.
What do you think? Can we eat it?
It's 1985, and after a string of Soviet leader deaths, when Mikhail Gorbachev is now leading the USSR. Now, Gorbachev viewed the West quite differently than his predecessors. He didn't see capitalism as flawed, but rather quite valid, and saw the poor living conditions in the Soviet Union as evidence of that. So in response, Gorbachev created a new policy of glasnost, or openness, allowing more Western ideas into the Soviet Union. Listen to rock music, eat food, and even talk shit about leaders.
Stalin sucks. Stalin sucks. Wait, I can't shoot this guy? Oh.
These looser restrictions broke the dam of freedom, resulting in elections and revolutions across the Soviet Union. Countries like Romania, Hungary, Poland, and more exploded against their oppressors, some violent, some not violent. Elections are held, and ripples quickly send tremors across the Soviet Union. Bada bing, bada boom, the Iron Curtain crumbled, and soon after, the untouchable Berlin Wall fell. Even in Mother Russia, revolution is abound for the second time in the century. The old communist guard staged a coup. It's a complex situation, too complex for my brain to handle. So to simplify, here's an image of the Soviet Union flag being lowered in Moscow.
See? I told you Stalin was bad.
And now, it's December 25th, 1991. The USSR is dissolved. Mikhail Gorbachev steps down, and one Boris Yeltsin became the president of the newly formed Russia. And that is where our incorrect story comes to an end.
And with the Cold War over, the world would go on to live happily ever after. Is what I have to say because America is spying on me. Tee.